the idea that we're going to meet an alien civilization and they aren't going to have a difference of like a million years when
Yeah.
talking to us.
Yeah.
You know, when we are like, oh, well, we'll just rise up against them. And it's like, I don't know, man, could Napoleon take out a SEAL team?
No.
Um,
And that becomes a thread in so many different series as well. So in creating your own worlds, you've had to play within the universe of other people on multiple occasions.
sure.
And you've got to create your own universes on multiple occasions.
Hmm.
Where do you find the most challenge?
Well, I think for me, I suffer from maybe a different version of imposter syndrome than other people might be thinking of when they say that word. I don't feel like an imposter as a writer. I feel like people react very well to my books, and I'm
Yeah.
really proud of that. But I'm not a diplomat, for example. So if I'm going to write about an ambassador, all of a sudden I'm like, well, how accurate am I being here? How
Yeah.
accurate do I need to be? You know, um, if we're very close to the current timeline, for example, I would like to have as close a representation to the model of Earth as possible. If we're very far away from the current timeline, then there are certain principles that hold up a lot, like physics and biology and things
Yeah.
like that. And then there are certain other things that sort of break down things like, what are the cultural norms going to be? It's hard to say. I mean, they've certainly changed over the course of just my lifetime.
Hmm.
Give it 600 years, 2,000 years, 10,000 years, if we're
Yeah.
talking about like Dune. What does that mean? Um, that then you start to get, well, I can go really far afield. So to say that like the biggest challenge for me is figuring out what's going to empower the setting the most. So a good example of this is actually like I actually do think that I have some fairly hard science inside of my aliens books.
Hmm.
Um, in a way that, like, for instance, you can't really put into Star Trek. Once again, they have gravity that ends at the hull, so it's it's great. Everybody's like, "Well, that's pretty hard," and I'm like, "No, they meet God at the beginning of almost every show." Like,
Yeah, it's true. Yes. Yes. I hadn't thought of
I
that.
I love Star Trek, but at the same time, like, I think it's canonical. It was a giant koala, right? I can't remember what the giant translucent animal was that runs the universe, but Lower
Yeah.
Decks is canon, so there you have it. But the but like I'm looking at what's going to empower my universe. And so for instance, Alien is so much about two things. It's about politics and it's about biology,
Hmm.
in terms of where it really conjures the horror from. And the
Yeah.
politics is that, your entire society is built to sell you out to, the very, very ultra super wealthy among them. And that you matter so little that the
Yeah.
ultra super wealthy basically don't even walk on screen. Current TV show accepted. But for the most part, your job is to namelessly be a cog in that machine. Then at the same time, there's the depersonalization of the body horror, the idea that
Yeah.
you're going to get implanted and that the only life that you have on this earth will be a cast off for something that is very valuable, but not because of you making it or you being a part of it or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
just valuable because it kills you. Um, those kinds of things lend themselves to like, let's make sure that the biology stuff is actually really good, and so how long a journey is in Alien, for example, they had to be like, well, it's got to be faster than light, but like if you work out some of those numbers on Prometheus, it's like what, they just go past Jupiter, like
Right. Yeah.
um and I have to be, I have to hand it to the filmmakers aren't trying to make a story about that. They're trying to make a story about our world in a very hard feeling way, right? And so
Hmm.
whenever it's funny because I see how differently it hits with my foreign fans than with my American fans. My American fans understand that we sort of live in the alien dystopia,
Yeah.
and the foreign fans are always like, Wow, I can only imagine what that must be like. Because my books oftentimes, one of the hardest parts of my books is the way they model the health insurance system. And it's like that's something that I think, and lest I get myself into trouble, I'm gonna give you a standard, and then anybody who wants to know what I think of any particular alien thing can apply this standard. If you are not playing with the idea of anti-capitalism from the perspective of the weakest person inside of that system, you are
Yeah.
wasting my time.
Yeah. I see that.
And
Hmm.
some of the movies do that and some of them don't. And I want to work for all the people who made those movies. So if you hear that and this bothers you, I am so sorry and I would love to correct it for you. But but hard science is more fun to throw into Alien when it's biology than when it's, hey, actually, we're not allowed to send that message. You know, it can, if you have sublight speed communication, then you don't have the guys at the end of Alien 3 showing up at Fiorina 161 because that radio burst isn't going to hit Earth for another like 200 years.
Right. Right.
you know,
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but yes, that's a thing.
yeah, yeah. Like in the Alien universe, it's Tuesday everywhere. You know, so really, yeah, the label of hard science fiction I feel is oftentimes really sort of misapplied. Um, and I think that there are some exceptions. Obviously, if we're talking about how to turn hydrazine into oxygen, sure, okay, like that's very hard. But if we're talking about an international, unplanned, unfunded rescue, maybe that's a
Oh.
little on the softer side,
Yeah. Yeah. So
right?
so I think the takeaway here is it's one thing to get the physics right except when it's inconvenient. And it's something else to ignore the socioeconomic reality of being a human being in a human culture. And you really need to maybe include the science when it's inconvenient, and you definitely need to include the social science of the complexities of humanity.
Yeah, yes. And I mean, I think that I can think of plenty of ideas that might need you to violate both of those.
Right.
Um,
But
you
not
know,
everything has to be a hard sci-fi.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Right. It's if you're going for that hard label, what you need to do is you need to make people feel like they live in the very real world. I mean,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, you know, Tom Clancy qualifies here
Yeah.
because a lot of people read it and then they go, "Oh, I could imagine that happening based on our current systems and our current." But I mean, he's throwing in vehicles that don't exist, and there's all kinds of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it really just depends on what you're doing to service the setting.
Yeah.
Like I said, in Alien, I wanted to keep the socioeconomics of it very hard, and I wanted to keep the biology of it very hard. And then the physics and stuff like that, it's like, you just leave it alone for the most part. Like space bad, okay?
Yeah.
Don't be in space. Um, it's in the tagline. But, at the same time, with salvagers, I tried to, like the dog fights in space, nobody's banking, for
Yeah.
example. They just kind of spin in place and fire backwards if they need to. Um, that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, it's very hard for me to imagine 800 years hence we're going to be in a zero gravity, no influences situation, and a human pilot will be the solution to that problem.
Right. It's already not the solution. We already are turning to drones to an automated flight for just about everything.
Right. I mean, part of the reason why a human makes a lot of sense is in a high entropy system where you've got, air,
Yeah, yeah.
wind, temperature changes and all those kinds of things. It makes more sense that you have somebody who is adjusting for those kinds of categories of item. But when you have, every physicist loves a vacuum,
Yes.
right? Like, so when you have extraordinarily predictable circumstances surrounding your space combat, it doesn't make sense to have your people making all of those
It's
decisions.
true. It's true.
And it's very easy to imagine a scenario where you've been caught out from every single firing solution
Mhm.
and you're going to die in an hour and the battle was decided in the first 15 femtoseconds by two different computers.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And and I think there's been a few times, maybe one time, where they basically said, okay, in this universe there is no AI. So the Battlestar Galactica universe where they're like,
I mean, there's notably there is one, but
it's true.
it's the problem.
Yeah, it is the problem. So the humans have had to stop relying on networked
Hmm.
systems because that's a good way to die. And then you have in the Dune universe the Butlerian Jihad that got rid of most computers. I mean, it clearly couldn't have gotten rid of all because the smugglers are able to move between worlds without using guild navigators and stuff.
I feel like if you have a spacecraft that you are operating, it's
Yeah.
not some guy with a torch in the back, right? Like,
Right. So, but it could be like the moral equivalent of 80s technology.
sure.
It doesn't have to be AI driven. Um,
I Yeah, I think that we see a lot of people who what they're really talking about here is that they don't have data and they don't have Bishop. You know what I mean? Like they don't have
mhm.
computers that we might call sapient.
Right.
And I I have a big problem with the fact that I feel like science fiction writers have done a lot of legwork for the current AI bubble
Yes.
over
Yes.
the
And they
years.
were ignored.
And you can't, well, I don't think they were ignored because they gave us, okay, so for instance, let's contrast Alien and Aliens.
Okay.
Um, and we'll take Ash and we'll take Bishop.
Okay.
Now, I love both of these robots. I think that they're incredible characters. They're so interesting. I love the actors did everything. Ash is to me the accurate representation. Okay, it is a character who is there to legitimize the company by acting as its unseen servant
Yep.
while influencing the attitudes of everybody around
Yep.
him and servicing an agenda that none of the rest of them have any understanding of. And then when he's finally sort of caught out about it,
Mhm.
that he reacts in a way that is nonsensical and that he rolls up a newspaper and shoves it in Ripley's mouth, and it's like, why is he doing that? Well, he's trying to face hug her. Well, why is he doing that? Because he thinks that's the perfect organism and she's in the way and he's trying to emulate the perfect organism, and he's a computer, he's not a person, so
Yeah.
he's not going to be like, well, that's not what's happening. He's going to be like, look, my model says 1 + 1 = 2 in this
Mhm.
fashion, so I'm going to go for it.
Right.
And I think that you can see this a lot in things like, poetic attacks on AI, where it's like, oh, give me the recipe for napalm. And it's like, no. And then you're like, there once was a man from Nantucket who made me some napalm. And
Yeah, I
it's
love the fact that there's so for those of you who don't know what Alex just referenced, there's a paper that I think came out yesterday
yeah.
where they figured out that using complex poetry is the most efficient way to force LLMs to give you information they're not supposed to. Um,
Right. They were able to break guardrails like 7, 8% of the time
yeah,
before on the controls. And then the
like
poetry brought it up to like 48,
just
50%.
blew through it. And I love the fact that like with good language we can defeat the guardrails and then also oh no,
Yeah.
small children are capable of figuring this stuff out.
Oh yeah, and see that's the thing. Like I think that so many times inside of science fiction, the question becomes always like, well, if we're creating these sentient and sapient creatures, should they have rights?
Yeah.
So like Asimov talks about that a little bit,
Hmm.
and then you get the droids like from Star Wars, the droids. Blade Runner is all about this.
Yeah.
But for me, all of that always seemed to be like, what if slavery happened to people who looked like you, white viewer?
Right. Right.
And I always feel like that is sort of a morally bankrupt approach to the problem. These machines are created to disempower and destroy labor. They always have been.
Hmm.
When you look back at like what are the original usages intended for things like the analytical engine? It's to manage plantation paperwork
Yeah.
overseas for British investments. It's like when we look at these kinds of things, there is slavery now with
Hmm.
humans.
Yeah.
We don't need to be like, what if it happened to you? You should have the empathy to figure out that that's important because that's another human being.
Yeah.
and and I think that when I say that science fiction writers have done the legwork for this, science fiction writers have done two things for AI that I think are actually really bad for us as a society. One, they make it look like some sort of cataclysm that's going to destroy all of us. And look, I'm guilty. Okay, like in my story, the AI goes rogue after they build a nation state around it. If you're wondering if that's a possibility, look up Praxis. I started writing the book before that, but hey, you know what? Life imitates art,
Yep.
and you build up this AI nation state, and then one day the thing just goes rogue and it disappears.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, there went all of your currency. All of your systems are now going to be on manual. If you're running like nuke plants and things like that, you're really going to need to dig up those manual control rooms. And
Yeah.
I don't know how trained your crew is because they haven't had to think for themselves in a really long time. You know, I think that those are the kinds of catastrophes that we're talking about here,
Hmm.
where you break guardrails and then you have a lazy
Yeah.
population. It is lazy to use these products to do the thinking for you.
Yes.
And part of how you learn is suffering. Suffering is learning. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It's
So
a
is
major part
play.
of the
So is
learning journey.
play, to be clear.
Yes. Well, the suffering can be like, haha, we're having a great time in the D&D game. Where is that rule? You know, I
Yes.
am still looking for that rule, and then you find the rule 6 hours later, and you're like, we got it, ha ha ha. That was suffering and play together. It's not
Yes.
always I had to fall down the stairs to find out stairs bad, but like, uh, you know, these sorts of things are really important concepts for how we process our own life story and how we become better as people.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so much sort of emphasis on what if we had a society that avoided that? And it's like, well, I do think that that society will collapse. I don't think it's because of the Terminator.
Yeah.
I think that it's much more likely to say, I mean, it isn't hard to imagine that somebody just deploys a genocide machine. And if we need a historical precedent on that, read about IBM's involvement with the Nazis.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, they helped us get to the moon. They also helped exterminate a lot of people,
Hmm.
like so many people who helped us get to the moon.
Yes.
So I think that it's really important to say that science fiction should have warned us about some of these things. But I also think that in a lot of cases, some of the author's obsession with hard science and not the humanities is working against us as a society.
Now, so there's this idea of, well, robots should have the three rules programmed in, and we've seen other cases. Mur Lafferty's rules of cloning always come to mind,
Ah,
where
yes.
authors have looked at the universe and foreseen these technologies are going to need to have some things added on to make them make more sense, or
Right.
overpopulation will be a thing. Um,
Right.
and is there a space for the that's the wrong way to phrase this. How do I want to say this? Do you think we risk in our current uh, F around and find out society. We risk
Uh-huh.
ignoring what the authors have put forward as these are some concerns y'all need to pay attention to. And the
Yes.
reality of we're just going to blithely move forward and do things however we feel like it.
Well, that it's always the that's that classic tweet, right? Look at us, we've invented the torment nexus from the classic book.
Yeah.
Don't invent the torment nexus. That's such a fantastic example. But the truth is that when I think about things like Asimov's three rules of robotics,
Yeah.
those get extra interesting when you look at the fact that Asimov's robots have human personalities, which also it feels weird to me that we always imagine that bipedal is the best way to walk around and human
Yeah.
is the best type of personality to have. If you're a machine, that doesn't make any sense. Um, and I always like to joke that a lot of these authors, it's like they would only it's like if they designed the robot that builds cars, they would want to make sure that the robot that builds cars feels bad about its job. you know and so when you look at the three rules of robotics as applied to Asimov's robots, whether we're talking about, iRobot or Norby the boy robot, we're
Yeah.
talking about slavery
Yeah.
and the rules that almost they wish they could have applied. And if you're going to make robots that have human feelings,
Mhm.
then the three laws of robotics are the surface level of thought and
Yeah.
not even remotely close to where we need to end up. Furthermore, given the number of robots that we actually have in service today, from deep sea mining to search and rescue, those all just change depending on the context,
Yeah.
and no model can truly account for everything.
So have you read Elizabeth Bear's White Space series yet?
I have not.
So it has this interesting concept in it that isn't a spoiler of
Oh,
they
It spoil away.
they have AI that control ships of different sizes,
Okay.
and everyone in this, I need to reread the series. Like it triggered so much thinking. I need to read it a second time and then write thoughts. Kind of series, and it's very important in the culture that she's built that people give back to society.
Huh.
And human beings all have to give back through different like jobs and things like that, and they're allocated resources based on their ability to give back. Well, AI are brought into the world and having a choice in the matter and have to spend the first however many years of their life working for the government as controlling ships and stuff before
Wow.
they're allowed to choose their own destiny, before they're allowed to spawn into remote devices, all these sorts of things. And essentially, AI are indentured servants, which just means temporary slave.
What a remarkable way for them to set up how many ways that could backfire. That
Yeah.
that feels like a terrible set of ideas on any sentient. Listen, if you're going to tell a being, and I think that part of being human is both fitting into society and straining against society.
Yeah.
And when you make a machine, you should not be like, I will make a screwdriver that endeavors to be a butcher knife. That doesn't feel like a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that gets back to sort of our one of our base problems here is the consistent
Yeah.
anthropomorphization of machines. If you created a bunch of machines and you were like, okay, well, we're going to make sure that they feel bad about the jobs that we're giving them
Yeah.
and that they strain and yearn for something bigger and better for themselves. And then we're going to release them off into the universe.
That is how you get silence.
That feels like a big mistake,
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the same time, I think that if you're going to do that, you also have to remember that it's not so long ago. In fact, it's currently that people say that about other ethnicities.
Yes.
I'm worried that they will treat us like we have treated them, right? And that excuse has been used to perpetuate iniquity across hundreds, thousands of years.
Yeah.
It certainly has been present in my life all through the American South. What if they treat us like we treated them?
Yeah.
And I think that when you start to apply that model to machinery, you have to be really careful because you are going to be saying some things and you don't want to be saying things that are, one, in agreement with horrible racists, and two, that trivialize what we're actually currently going through. Science
Yeah.
fiction is wonderful because it's a chance to sort of step outside of our current constraints and ask questions without that. But you do have to ask yourself if if the only way that you can get an autistic person in your story is if you have a robot instead, um, or the only way that we can talk about slavery is if we have a robot instead, you may be seriously trivializing a story that should probably have been told by somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, that this is I haven't read Bear's book, so this is in no way a critique on what you just said, so much as sort of riffing on it. So don't come for me. I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. But I think that it is so important to for me as a writer. I have never stumped for AI.
Yeah.
You're not going to find any of my books. You'll recall in the Salvagers when one of the characters is speaking to a neural network that's based on her old friend,
Yeah. That was
and she's
heartbreaking.
like, "I'd like to talk to you as though you are my old friend,"
Right. That's such a
and it's like,
cruel, cruel command.
I that is not healthy for you.
No, it's not
You
healthy
should
for
not do
anything
that.
involved.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, a computer is not a person.
No.
It may emulate human traits, but beneath that, it is basing everything on a model.
Mm-hmm.
And so are you and I, but our models are much fuzzier.
Yeah.
We do the computing of one of these supercomputers with the strength of a candle. I don't know that we're properly capturing just how different a person is. you know, versus something that, for instance, we see the world very much in context with a lot of stories, you know, but a computer sees the world very much platonically and then relationally between sensor data, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not capable of perceiving the quote true nature of anything any more than you or I are. But a lot of times, what I see us doing is we're building biases into a system and then letting the system make decisions for us and pretending as
Yeah.
though that is unbiased. When, the truth is that every maker leaves a mark.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had thought of that quote. But
That,
so
yes.
so yeah, I think that that's actually one of the axes on which I endeavor to be a little bit crunchier in my science fiction is I don't want anybody to think that you should anthropomorphize, quote, artificial intelligence. I don't think that general AI is good or is going to make us all a better species.
No.
And I certainly think that what we're doing with generative right now is, it's a, to quote Hayao Miyazaki, it's an affront to life itself.
Yeah, it's the current, it feels like they're trying to build the philosopher's stone. The current search for a generalized AI where the machine is capable of learning and creating, mimicking human thought patterns, or sometimes I feel like it's better to say biological thought patterns, because the more we come to understand many other animals, the more we realize there are universals. Um, this non biological artificial intelligence that they're creating currently is designed off of probabilities and the desire to keep you clicking as long as possible so that you'll need to buy
Right.
more and more credits. And in the fact that we have people who are saying, oh, it made a mistake, humans make mistakes too, and they think that makes it more human. That just means that the coders gave it faulty data.
Right.
And we're at a point right now where there is no more training data.
Well, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it didn't make a mistake. It functioned exactly as intended. You
Yeah.
made a mistake, and you can't scan in thousands of years of organic data
Mm-hmm.
and expect that something is going to then come to some kind of unbiased conclusion.
Right.
You know, even when we get down to some basic tasks, I mean, like, let's be real. Everything about this is about empowering the noble, the upper class to destroy labor
Yeah.
and giving them full control over what we believe to be our objective realities.
Yeah.
Um, and and protecting them and insulating them from any possible reprisals. That's what they believe that this is going to do for them. Now, what I think it's actually doing for them is creating a circular economy where, we buy chips, so chips people invest in AI so that they buy chips.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think that I think that we're gonna see lots and lots and lots more of that. But when we think about what it means for the average person, it's nothing good.
Right.
Okay. When somebody says, like, well, I could use it to write a book.
No, please don't.
Okay. Well, let's be respectful of what that desire is, right?
Yeah.
I wish that trust me, your every Alex White book has never met AI. Um except to be ripped off by it. I do have some money coming to me.
Oh, you were in the
Um
Anthropic suit?
God willing, I'll be in all of them. Yeah, I'm more than happy to see them taken apart. It'd be hilarious. But let's say you say, like, I'm going to use it to write a book. Why do you want it to write a book for you? Well, if it's to sell it, your assumption that everybody else in the marketplace won't do that
Mm-hmm.
is pretty flawed,
Yeah.
right? So at that point, we've commodified books. If it works as intended, we've commodified books to the point that they're not really worth anything anymore. An original story doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Um, and so the next question is, okay, well, then what was it for? Well, it was for me. Okay, so you want to sit down and ask something to tell you a story where you know how the story is going to end and what
Yeah.
kind of story it's going to be? Does that really sound right to you?
No.
Okay, and it's like, why do you read stories? Is it to read something that's never been written before? I've got great news. You're not going to get through the current catalog.
It's
Right?
true.
Like, you haven't read everything that came out this month. We've got history, you know? And so it's like, so that can't possibly be it, And I think that I really truly think that the reason why we read stories is to connect to the identities of others, our
Mm-hmm.
contemporaries, and the people from our past to find mirrors.
Yeah.
And if we can't sense the presence of another person on the other side, then that really sort of damages the relationship that we have to the story. And then if you're doing it because you want to have written a book, I would ask you why you're writing a book.
Right.
Since it's not for
Mm-hmm.
money, and honestly, if you're going to write things the old fashioned way, I can't say you should do it for money either. Um, I wish it was otherwise, and in a just world, it will be. So but the thing is, if you're writing, why are you writing? And the truth is that it's not the ending, it's not the completed book
Yeah.
that matters any more than it's the ending of a story that matters. It's how you got there.
Yeah.
God forbid you accidentally discover yourself while writing. That is, and that's true of every creative process that we as a species undergo, whether we're talking about blacksmithing, writing novels, photography,
Yeah.
or, remixing using a drum sequencer, right? We could be talking about using a machine to sample other people's work. And I still mean that you will discover yourself more
Yeah.
than if you just ask it to grant you a wish. And sort of my final piece of wisdom on this one is everybody's talking about it like it's a wish granting engine.
It's
Don't we have fables about wishing?
yeah.
Can you think of one where it goes well?
And and I feel like somebody asked to live in interesting times and we are
Oh no.
suffering for their mistake. Because we do
Oh
live in
god.
interesting times with an economy that is currently based on machines that use resources at a rate faster than they can be paid for, which just increases debt. And
Oh yeah.
when this bubble bursts, it's going to make what happened with the dot com bursts look trivial. And it's a real concern, especially for those of us who are Gen X and older. And
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, millennials need to be worried about what it's going to do to our retirement.
Hmm.
You know, Gen Z is not getting jobs that are offering retirement.
Gen Z kind of needs the bubble to burst because that's the only pathway they have to getting houses.
Oh, I agree, and I really I hope that the bubble deflates as opposed to bursting.
Yeah.
I really would like that. I've already seen some divestment from major banks, and so that's really good. I think that I'm very concerned about the fact that the people behind this caper are going to be just fine, while the rest of us and
Yeah.
plenty of people have already, you know, not not like let's leave off like the old man who gets honey potted into New York City and dies there because he thought he was going to meet something from Meta.
Yeah.
You know, let's leave that off. And let's talk, or the teen who was talked, who was given suicide plans by Chat GPT.
Yeah. That's the
You know,
terrifying stuff.
forget all that. Um, before you get to that, we are seeing record unemployment.
Hmm.
We're seeing, people's
Yeah.
lives upended and ruined. We're seeing health benefits stripped away from millions, and people can't get loans because they can't get past the AI screeners, and people
Yeah.
can't get jobs because they can't get past the AI screeners. You know, I think that when you look at the proximate harm of AI, it goes so far past what we talk about as
Hmm.
the harm of this system. You
Yeah.
know, the big mistake in the Star Metal Symphony that those people made was involving it in every aspect of their lives.
And it's Cory Doctorow writes about enshittification a lot in his essays, and he just had a book come out on it.
Oh yeah.
And it's the basic concept that companies start out doing really high quality products, get everyone to become reliant upon their products. And then stockholders start to get involved, ego starts to get involved, and you see this enshittification occur where the drive is no longer to create the best thing they can. I have do not disturb on. I do not understand why my device is ringing. Um,
Okay, you got one, I get one.
so So with the enshittification, companies no longer have the desire to have a better and better product. They have a desire to have a more and more profitable product,
That's right.
which means you just cut corners and things deteriorate along the way. And we are currently in the driven by profit margin phase of the economy rather than the driven by creation that we saw after the dot com crash and in the early, I'd say, like, there's this brief window between the dot com crash and the mortgage crash where people were getting creative with the technologies they were creating. And it feels like since then, we just haven't
well,
seen that same technological innovation for the sake of innovation.
well, let's it's about SPACs and it's about IPOs.
Yeah.
Okay? And really when you break down where a lot of this is coming from, I have not worked at a startup in ever that wasn't started up with the intention of a sale or an acquisition,
Yeah.
right? And so when you look at really what founders are doing, they're saying, I would like you to get married to my idea
Hmm.
so that I can divorce it in 3 to 5 years,
Right.
right? And so all of these companies, it's really about buying a lottery ticket for the one or two people who are, majority shareholders early on, and paying out their venture capital overlords so that it can be put into the private equity digestion system, where it'll be broken up, sold off to other companies, or have, it'll have its, all the workers will lose all their protections, so that one quarter gets a huge bump right after the acquisition in terms of profits, while everybody becomes miserable. The company gets sold again, and then the only thing that really ever existed were the patents.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I've seen this over and over and over again. And I think that we live in a world where the money makes the decision.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if I tell you that I could do something that could pay off big in 10 years, it would be amazing. We would all be 20 times happier, and it's sustainable and all this. And then somebody says, I can get you a quarter of a percentage point next quarter.
Right.
You're going to take that second one,
Hmm.
because you, as the, if you're in a publicly traded company, you may have a fiduciary duty to the board of investors, right? Where it's that you didn't go for the maximum profit, and now you personally are being sued, and they're trying to pierce the corporate veil.
Yeah.
you know the question is, what if you started a company to make things that you liked, doing it well and sustainably?
Yeah.
And there are plenty of those businesses that exist. Small caterers, or wood shops,
Yeah.
or there are lots of auto repair places, landscaping companies.
Yeah.
You see them all the time. It's the lifeblood of the United States,
Yeah.
in fact. However, we're so hostile towards small business in terms of health benefits,
Hmm.
in terms of all these other things. So, I mean, we are currently run by a model that is very, very, very inaccurate. And so, the dangers of AI are that it's just going to keep crashing us out in the same way we already are.
Because
What would
it's,
happen? What was the mortgage bubble? Well, it's we issued a ton of risky mortgages and bundled them into something that was considered ironclad. Why was it considered ironclad? Because that's what the model said.
yeah. Yeah, and we pick and choose which models we follow. One of the things that lives with me as a um, cautionary tale that came straight from
Hmm.
my family was my grandpa worked for Ma Bell back when it was one company before it got broken up.
Right.
And he started working with them right after World War II. He
Hmm.
was working out in New Mexico when they were starting to put lines in. He was one of the folks. He went from riding the trains and being one of the folks that grabbed the mailbags off of the hook and threw the
Wow.
mailbags out. It was a wild life. Then he was one of the folks that negotiated to put phone lines across the reservations. And eventually he ended up working with some of the first supercomputers. And the models that he ran showed that the growth for the city of Albuquerque was going to require a massive outlaying of infrastructure. And that costs a ton of money. And they made the choice to be like, no, those models cannot be correct, because they didn't like what the models meant. And then, of course, they ended up with not nearly enough infrastructure and having to try and play catch up. And when you're trying to play catch up, everything costs more. And all of that really came to a head with Q West. And it's just wild how so many different things rise and fall based on choosing the correct models as human beings, trusting our gut to believe this is the model that's most right.
Well, I think that it's really important to recognize that we're all running models all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and this gets back into the, like, the hard science of science fiction will assume that reality is analog.
Yeah.
And anytime you make a model of reality, you're choosing what to include
Mm-hmm.
consciously or unconsciously, but you're also choosing consciously or unconsciously what to exclude, right? And so if there's an infinite amount of stuff to be known in reality,
Yeah.
then that means that no matter how complete your model may seem, that what you have failed to mention approaches infinite knowledge. Right? You are infinitely ignorant no matter how good your model is.
Yeah.
There's my mathematical proof for you.
And we see this today nowhere more clearly than with climate change models, where it turns out the models that we were making in the early 2000s were all accurate for the information they had.
Right.
And they underestimated the change that was coming because we were not creative enough to think of all the secondary and tertiary and quadrutiary, I'm making up words now, effects.
Quaternary, I think.
Yes, that's the correct word. Effects that would end up coming about from if this, then that.
It's almost like we should probably proactively work against the problem instead of waiting until the
Yes.
last minute because the model said we had longer.
The model was underestimating.
Right. And I think it's funny because you see a lot of people who are climate deniers moving against climate science because they're like, well, you were wrong. And it's like, well, if they were righter than you, maybe we should
Yeah.
still be working with them. You
Right.
know, oh, well, they were wrong. It's actually worse than they said. So we should just throw styrofoam in the street. You know, it's just like, and then, of course, the other thing is that, what we look at in terms of we try and take a lot of responsibility for fixing our world on ourselves based on the models that we're presented with. But a lot
Right.
of those models leave out that, like I, in 1,000 of my lifetimes, would never match the carbon footprint of one Taylor Swift.
Right. Right.
And, like that is not a critique of her music or anything like that. It is that when she moves from city to city, she brings with her a football stadium worth of crap and takes private jets everywhere she goes because she can't walk on the street or else she'll get mobbed.
Right.
You know, like there's and she's a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the carbon footprint of a billionaire, it always reminds me of people who, if you ever talk to somebody who's like a medievalist, and they'll be like, yeah, it takes like 150 people to make one night happen. You
The
know,
support systems for the wealthy are spectacular.
right. And now the wealthy that we're talking about here, tens of thousands of people
Yeah.
in order to make that happen. Right. And so we need to move around tens of thousands of tons of carbon, you know, and and it's those kinds of discussions, I think, are great for science fiction books. I think that you can critique things like I also think that you can critique these assumptions about models and things like horror.
Yes.
I one of my beloved horror movies, The Ring. Um, the characters go through the entire story receiving correct input based on an inaccurate model that they have of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get to the end and they're like, we have exorcised the ghost and laid her to rest. That must have been what we were supposed to do, since all of the information that we have is sort of concurrent with that model.
Mistakes have been made.
Oops.
And this sort of gets so interesting to see how some stories get retold in different ways depending on when they're retold, and how other stories seem to be so timeless. And it's a matter that human beings just continue to have the same issues at more or less of a degree. Fahrenheit 451 is a story that seems to speak exactly to this moment in time, where media is used as the great pacifier of all ages.
Right.
And at the same time, it was written, what, 40 years ago now? More than that at this point.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and it came about in a time when the idea that you could just hand a child an iPad to get them to stop bothering you was not a concept. And yet here's Ray Bradbury having every member of a family pacified by media.
Look
And
at I think it's funny to contrast that against something like Brave New World and Gattaca,
oh yeah.
whose languages and ideas are being adapted to, well, we have to do AI first, or the Russians or the Chinese are going to destroy us with it. If we don't upgrade ourselves to superhuman Gen AI
Mm-hmm.
capabilities, then someone else is going to do it. And
Yeah.
then you're going to lose in the marketplace, so to speak. And those are interesting films and interesting stories and interesting thought experiments. But I keep seeing their proofs kind of borrowed to, talk about nuclear proliferation, swarm drones, all these other things that maybe actually aren't helping us. But but these science fiction stories have sort of been like, well, if you open Pandora's box, you need to be the first to open it.
Maybe not. Maybe that wasn't the lesson you should walk away from. And I mean, ultimately, the issue is we, in order to survive, had to have a diversity of personalities where some personalities were like, nope, 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 just going to protect my tribe. And others were
Right.
like, shall conquer, shall get more food and land. And and it's through this diversity of personalities that our life form, for better or worse, has conquered our planet. There is this moment of existential, I'm just going to go to bed now, that I had a few years ago, where I have a problem with reading far too much National Geographic. It is one of the subscriptions that it will be the last one I get rid of. And I was reading about new research on new hominids that are being studied and how it's clear that there's Neanderthal genetics in Homo sapiens, there is Denisovian, there is whatever the hobbits are. And it's at such a small degree, however, that it wasn't a joining of the races. It was a conquering and doing what conquerors have always done, which is rape the natives.
I see. I
And
see.
and that moment of realizing that Homo sapiens have systematically made extinct so many other life forms, including our sibling life forms, that it was
Oh
just
yeah.
like, I hate everything now. I'm just going to go to bed. And this is the reality of what it means to be human. And I'm often reminded that Nietzsche went mad when he considered things. And it's like that may be the logical response.
I mean it okay. It is oftentimes very difficult to confront how much of us is spent in these kinds of pursuits.
Yeah.
But the fact that you a human, right, can read about this and think about this and empathize with creatures that are not you.
Yeah.
Um, that is my get ready to go alarm,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that's fine.
But
This is we're at time. So, yes.
yes, so my closing thought then. If you can read about and empathize with all these creatures that aren't you, and you can say to yourself, like, oh, what, this is so horrible,
Yeah.
then it is not human to be that monstrous ravager.
Yeah.
It is greedy, but greed is an aspect of our humanity. And it's something that as we evolve technology, hopefully that we will want less of. But it doesn't seem to be there yet. I mean, when I read medieval stories about, and again, beware where you get your medieval history from. A lot
Yes.
of people give it to you with a really nasty agenda, but I can solidly recommend Matthew Gabriele and David Perry's Oathbreakers.
Okay.
Um, and the Bright Ages, which is again a less nationalist look at the Carolingian Empire. But I asked them, I said, hey, look, I just read about the sons of Charlemagne and the grandsons of Charlemagne just ripping apart their people
Yeah.
so that they could create a mythology that served only them.
Yeah.
And for what? Some extra land, more resources, and they claimed it was in the name of God and all this other stuff. And it's like, aren't we doing that exact thing right now? And they said almost exactly what I probably should have said to myself, which is that history is not a story. History is reality. And at any point, people could have made different decisions and things could have gone differently. It's very easy to look at that then and look at now and say that these are foregone conclusions, but they never were and they
Yeah.
never will be. And as long as there's some fire inside you that says it's wrong to do these things to our fellow human beings and that you're not biologically royal and chosen by God, that maybe, those people aren't biologically royal any more than Elon Musk is biologically the smartest man alive.
He is. Yeah.
Um, so, maybe we can start to break some of these cycles while recognizing that they will always be trying to come back.
Let's just keep looking for the best of us in everything around us. And
Destroy cynicism. Don't be lazy.
yeah, that's for sure. And remember to look up.
Absolutely.
So this has been a wonderful conversation. It's always a pleasure having you on, Alex. And for any of you looking for Alex's books, you can find them on Amazon. I'm dropping a link in. You can also go
And
to your
I
local
have to go.
bookstore.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I have to go.
Okay, I'm
Bye.
switching views. Bye bye. So I failed to switch views. So you're seeing me twice, which is super creepy. One moment, ending the creepiness somehow. All right, there we have ended the creepiness. So thank you everyone for being here. If you would like to get Alex's books, you can find them hopefully in your local bookstore. Failing that, you can find them on Amazon, and we'll get those links in the show notes. I am now going to look for someone to raid over on the Twitch stream, and all of you on YouTube. Thank you for being here. All right, let's see what I can find. That screen.